originally, I had no idea that you were an author. Especially one that's so involved with MMA. It seems. I've seen you talk with a bunch of fighters lately: Rashad Evans,
Hmm.
Joanna, and several others.
Hmm.
Dominic, of
Hmm.
course. Are you currently working on a book, or is it done, or both? What's the status there?
So my first book's already been published. It's been out in the market for just over a year,
Okay.
and it's called Broken Before Battle: Changing Lives Outside the Octagon.
Okay.
And that one has eight fighters and coaches that share their history, a little bit about themselves. But really, more importantly, my goal was to share with the general public um, that they're really great guys and what they do to give back to community. So each one of them shares their stories, um, and the things they've overcome, but also what they're doing to affect their community. All of them, it come to find out, all of them are working with children, youth, in one way or another.
Hmm.
And so when you look at that book, it is a trilogy series. I'm in the process of book number two right now, and that's the one where you've mentioned some of the people I've already interviewed.
Hmm.
So I'm in the process of writing that one as well, and that one will be about one's called Broken Before Battle: Raising Champions for Tomorrow,
Okay. Oh, that's a
and it'll
really.
be from yeah, their perspective and some really key insights. Some of them are parents, and then some of them referring back to how their parents raised them. Um,
Okay.
it'll cover some parts about ADHD, children that are really having a hard time focusing, things like that. Some of the history of the physical sport itself, and I'm looking for and some nutrition things in there too. Looking forward to it.
Wow, yeah, that's a really cool idea. That's incredibly unique. That's awesome. That's really interesting. I'll have to get myself a book, and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, but it sounds very interesting. Um,
Yeah, make sure and get my the first one,
okay,
because it kind of will open the door why I'm doing what I'm doing,
okay,
where I came from, being Dom's mom,
yeah,
um, coming to love these guys, work out, go enjoy some hangout times and stuff like that too. So, and I train also, so
hmm,
it's a fun part of what I do.
nice, nice. So yeah, so that was kind of going to be my follow up question to that. Which might be a silly one, but was there any one thing that made you want to write books related, to MMA like this? I mean, obviously, it's kind of a big part of your life, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I was in third grade, I knew I really wanted to write.
Hmm.
I knew I'd eventually write a book. There's a lot of people that have a book in them. Um, I didn't really know that it would be about the MMA perspective, but in advance of writing it, I had been in connection with all these guys and listening to their stories, and just really felt, honestly, like that was something I was given to do. And so I just wanted to make sure the perspective was very different and unique from maybe the other things that have been covered out there, and it definitely is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for
So
sure. Um, yeah, and I mean, did you know about MMA before Dominic got into it?
I did not. So for myself, when I got started, even I really wanted to do things for self defense. And then I got really involved and loved the heck out of training and all of that kind of thing. So, but Dominic had been involved since he was out of high school. Um, and so, going to his fights and everything um, is how we got involved, of course,
Yeah.
and learning the ins and outs of it all. And then, like I said, getting to know some of the other guys and the stories that they share. And it's international, the guys that I was having the privilege of being around. So it really was a unique perspective. Wilson Hayes is from Brazil.
Hmm.
His story is super powerful, very challenging. And, Brendan Loughnane is from the UK.
Hmm.
And he's pretty hot right now with the PFL and everything too. So it's been a really, really amazing journey for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, I can
Kind of like a
imagine.
second mom to some of them,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, yeah, that's why I
So,
wanted to talk to you because it's such a unique perspective, I think. So I was really why I
mhm.
was really interested. And I'm sure that This is a pretty broad question, but what is just like the overall experience, been like being the mother specifically of, a championship caliber fighter?
Hmm. It's, well,
Roller
being a
coaster, huh?
fighter is one thing, being a mom of a champion in the sense of like all these other kinds of sports that are out there and everything else, being an MMA fighter, it's very different because there's so many misnomers about the pay and,
Hmm.
um, the workouts, the intense training. They train all the time. And, some people think that, I mean, I've trained, but there's no comparison.
Hmm.
None. They're doing 2 days. They're 2-hour trainings. They're hardcore. So most people have no clue about that either. But it's been neat because just knowing I had always said when he was young that he was a leader, and I raised all my kids that way. I knew they would be leaders in their area of expertise, whatever that would be as they grew up.
Hmm.
And so just helping him stay in that mindset to always treat people well. And, really wanting to focus on the fact that you stay in your lane, you do the things that are good and right and true. And with regard to fighting, some people would say, well, how on earth, like, how is that good?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
it is an art. It's a martial art. There's
Hmm.
so much respect and honor and all of that in there. And so learning some of those things too, I think people will understand it more fully. And the amount of give back, a lot of these guys are working with youth or training with youth or giving something back. And Dominick has done a lot of that as well. And he just does it naturally, but then also officially. So it's from a champion perspective. He just, I think he's down to earth. And that's one of the things we always wanted to make sure too,
Hmm.
was that he just stayed who he really is, and he doesn't let things get to his head.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
of
know,
course. Of course.
he's
And
worked hard to get where he's at, very,
yeah.
very hard.
Yeah.
Stayed very focused, lost a lot of time and things that, playtime, kid time. I talk about that in my book. Like, I just was concerned that he didn't get to live the life of a kid for very much because he was wrestling all the time, when he
Hmm.
was young. Moving into adulthood, you give up a lot to do that, to become a champion, let alone keep it, stay
Yeah.
as long as he did. So,
Yeah, have it taken away from you and then to get it back even, it's
Brian,
insane. um,
yeah, now he's going for number 3.
hmm is with all that in mind, you mentioned like to be a leader and everything, and the wrestling and everything. But is this something you ever would have imagined though him doing, as he was growing up?
No, I mean, he has a brother, so his siblings, they would fight and things like that. But no,
Hmm.
I did not imagine it. And that's one of the things. I did a podcast with Cage Free Chicks recently, and that was one of the things. It's like, you never know what your children are going to grow up
Yeah,
to do.
yeah.
And that's very true, and that's one of the reasons I also wanted to just kind of write about the experience, but also shed some light with other parents um, because little Johnny wants to get involved in like a martial art or something. It doesn't mean that he's going to be beating people up. As a matter of fact, it should mean the opposite,
Yeah, exactly.
because they learn the respect in the roles, that kind of thing, and how it gives a channel of focus. It's incredible. So some of the guys in my first book had really severe challenges as kids. And so, I mean, Seth became a better person, and Phil says that education was really difficult for him, but he pressed through. And, it was really hard for Danny too, because he had to learn how to manage the fight and family, because he had a young family. So all of that kind of thing is in there, and it's just been a real cool journey.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. And just going back to when he was growing up, what did you have an idea what you thought though that he might be kind of on track for when he was growing up, or it was kind of like we'll see what happens?
Well, like I said, when he was doing wrestling, I didn't really know anything about MMA.
Hmm.
And wrestling was wrestling. Um, but getting out and then, having him out of high school get involved and start doing the lower key fights, if you will, it was like, oh my gosh, he's really good.
Hmm.
And he's disciplined in it, and he came up with all his own style and everything, and that's why he was good.
Hmm.
He wasn't just doing what other people were doing. So as a really young kid, no, I mean, like, kids are going to fight and play and
Hmm.
this and that.
Yeah.
Figured he played soccer and baseball, um, and then wrestled. So, we didn't know what he would grow up to be, but it's been incredible.
It's worked out. Let's put it that way. It's worked out pretty
Yes,
well.
for sure, for sure.
um, and what would you say has been tougher for you though, as the mom? Has it been either? This is what I was assuming that it might be between seeing him, go through the injuries he's had to overcome, or the fact that he wanted to get into professional fighting in the first place.
No, I would say it was seeing the discipline that he had at a young age with regard to wrestling and the grit that is required there. I knew something bigger was coming because he loved it so much.
Hmm.
And I remember having difficult conversations with his coaches because he had to keep on such a low weight. That was one of the most difficult times when he was young. Um, Now then you take that and put that a little bit further with regard to MMA. Now you're doing that professionally. So you still have the weight thing. It's not as aggressive because he had to stay at that all the time when he was in wrestling.
Hmm.
Um, but it was watching all the eating challenges, not being able to enjoy Thanksgiving dinner, stuff like that
Yeah.
when he was young. Then when you get older, he's in MMA. Now he also is having to travel quite a bit. And again, the sacrifices are big. Relationships, um, downtime, things that, vacations, a lot of families take for granted. I have a lot of friends that, they all meet and go skiing, or they all meet and go do this and that. Well, that's not something that becomes an easy thing for us at all.
Hmm.
So um, that's been a little bit more difficult. But really, when he was young and he loved it so much, how could I not support him? And it's what he chose to do.
Hmm.
It was legal, it was moral, and it's ethical. So hey, you know, um, it may not always look that way to certain people.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons I wanted to write too, because I wanted people to realize, no, there are rules, even though it may not look like it. And that is hard, watching your son get hurt. But
Yeah.
I don't really necessarily look at him as my little baby boy. I look at him as a professional man that has chosen this as his career,
Hmm.
and I'm his backup and full support. So
Yeah.
I pray, honestly. That is part of who I am, and that's part of my role in what we are as a family, who we are, and that is one of the things that I believe has gotten us through as well.
Hmm. Definitely, and I'm sure that it's nice for him as a fighter, and you being the mom of the guy who has the best striking defense of all time.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
nice plus. So,
Yeah, it's really been neat to see him grow, but also stay very humble about it
yeah.
and know that the whole hype they have to create for each fight in each different fighter that they have to combat with in the cage, has its own tweaks and all of that. So it's been really neat watching him handle that. And then of course him coming into the perspective of being a professional commentator,
Hmm.
he made things happen while he was down and out that kept his mind in the game. He was brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was going to mention. Like, what do you think about that? His ability to capitalize on, the analyst and commentary work. I bet, it was kind of cool for you to see, like, oh, wow, he can still do something so impactful, I suppose, in the sport, if even if it's not fighting. I bet that was cool for you.
It has been really cool because I could see it way early on in his career, but he couldn't see it really until he had issues where he was almost forced into it. He had to do something, and keeping his head in the game and commentating, and he can now speak to people and organizations and all of that from a very different perspective that he never would have. I mean, as a young kid, he wouldn't even get in front of a class.
Hmm.
Well, but this is something he knows. He lives it, he breathes it, he knows it well. And I'm super, super proud of him. But also, uh, he has recreated himself, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my opinion, probably the smartest mind, which, I mean, it makes sense, though, when you see how he fights. So, I mean, it's not too surprising if you know what you're watching in the cage and then, oh, wow, yeah, this guy really knows what he's talking about. It makes sense. So,
Mm-hmm. Yep,
yeah.
it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows what he's talking about. And I told him when I heard him for the first time, because I don't always get to go see everything
Yeah,
live,
yeah, of course.
And plus, going there live, you can't hear it anyway. So you hear it on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I really got to hear him, well, he was analyst first, but then commentating. Um, I told him, I said, UFC doesn't realize this, but you have just changed the game for the layperson watching this sport because you draw them in and explain what it feels like, what it smells like. I mean, you are describing in detail things that they would never ever know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's powerful. And I think that if the UFC is smart, they will continue to utilize you in a major way, and put you in positions where you will be able to continue to do that because men and women are able to understand it more completely. People that have never ever even gotten close to anything like fighting,
Yeah.
they can understand it because of his perspective and the way that he describes things.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
even if the UFC doesn't utilize him, there's options now for him to help out other people. But he's going to stick with the UFC. I think that's safe to say.
well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was interesting because sometimes they don't know who they have within fighters.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And things start being revealed about different fighters and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a process, and I know they're in the business, and I think it's a very wise business choice for
Hmm.
them to continue to utilize him. And across the board, who knows what other areas he'll get into.
Hmm.
You know?
For sure. And so this is a tough question, I would imagine. But has there been one moment in his career that's kind of stuck out, more, which was bigger for you, kind of, because I mean, there's obviously the debut is always big, but I mean, the first title win, I mean, coming back to the Mizugaki win, the TJ win, recapturing. There's so many to choose from. So, is there one
Mm,
that sticks out most for you?
mm,
That's a tough one, right?
it is. Um, the Mitsugaki one was really amazing, but TJ was too for
Hmm.
two different reasons. Mitsugaki, he came back and he only had to fight 3 rounds, which was really sweet. Um, but he came back with such a, a vengeance and almost shocked himself. If you do the replay, you look at that. He's walking around going, from what my perspective,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, look what I just did. Did I? Whoa, everybody who would be watching. Um, but it was also that he was so confident, and he knew that he knew that he knew that he could do that. And he had so many people just talking trash about him not being able to do that. And then
Hmm.
he turned around with regard to TJ and did the same thing, only bigger because it was championship.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't know what that takes to go from zero to champion again because of the workout, but also you go from a 3 to a 5 round. There's a significant difference, and a lot of people, the general public doesn't get it. They don't understand it. But the intricacies of what he had to put his body through to get there, incredible. And so then having that year, that 2016 year was grueling because he had 3 championship fights. Who does 3 championship fights in 1 year?
Yeah, he definitely came back and got right back to being active. So yeah, you're right.
And I don't know if there's another record. I haven't researched it. But who does 3 in 1 year, and from the comeback that he did, with the way that 16 ended, that really stunk.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible year, and we're gonna have another one coming up 2020.
Exactly. So. And I mean, you mentioned it, so I mean, what are the exact updates on him? How is he doing right now?
I wish I had some. I just know that he's wanting to be ready. He's continuing to train and do all the things he knows and can do to do so. And that's Dominick. He never gives up. He never stops. He does do what is, recommended by medical, because he's highly involved every day in that, which you can see on social media.
Yeah.
But he takes that very, very seriously because of the injuries he has had. He doesn't want to ever do anything early or anything like that. So he's learned all that. His body just is different than some of the other fighters, and that's what he has had to overcome.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't have any dates or anything for you. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
I have Zippo on that.
All good.
No inside scoop.
That's fine. That's fine. I had to ask. I mean, it was bad.
I understand.
Yeah.
I do.
It's funny though, because people, they still kind of question like, can he come back? I mean, okay, hold on. We've already seen it, and sure, the process, may be slower now, but it's because he's gone through it, right? And you really don't want to screw up again.
Right.
So it's like it's down to a science for him at this point. So I don't think you can question it. He knows what he's doing. He's going to do it right. He's a perfectionist, right? I mean, would you say that's fair? Yeah.
So, I would say that a lot of times he is a perfectionist, and the only thing about perfectionists is a lot of times, this is where Dominick is different. I think a lot of times perfectionists won't learn things new. He's still very teachable.
Okay. Interesting.
Because a lot of times, perfectionists, they think they already have it and they just keep screwing it up.
Okay.
Like they can't get it perfect. So they keep trying to get it perfect. Well, you won't. There's zero risk in perfect.
Yeah, you're really blowing my mind there, because I feel like, I consider myself a perfectionist, but now that you say that, I'm like, okay, you're kind of blowing my mind a bit. You've changed my outlook of it.
That's the way I look at it, because that's one of the things, for myself in business and all of that is looking outside the box. Is it supposed to be me? Is it going to be different, or am I going to do the same thing that everybody else has done? And with regard to Dominick, is it supposed to be him? Well, he finds that out. And is he going to do it the same? Heck no. Every single one of his fights, like when he did a suplex with Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the super move of the night. Like, where do you come up with this stuff? So it's getting creative, and that's just, to me, where he is different, and he's willing to learn and do things different. But what works, he keeps working forward. If something's not broken, you don't necessarily fix it. But with technology and all that, look at what his workouts were and his recovery compared to what they are now. They're very different. Technology has changed, and you have to take the risk. He took the risk with one of his surgeries with regard to doing the tendon that wasn't his own.
Yeah.
And it didn't stick. Well, if you have a super athlete, that's probably not the best way to go. But he did all the research he could. He did what he was being told to do. So he knew not to do that again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but he had to learn that the hard way, and that wasn't his decision necessarily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was the fastest, quote, recovery. What are you going to do when you're a professional athlete?
Mm-hmm.
How many other athletes do they recommend that with? I don't know. It was a challenge, but he overcame that too. So
Yeah. I could not agree more. I really couldn't. But,
yeah, it's crazy.
all right, Suzette. Well, I have kept you for a while, but I will leave you with one last question. And
Sure, I'm good too.
yeah, okay, great. um, but last thing I have for you: do you have any favorite fighters that aren't related to you, specifically, that you like to watch? You know, as just a fan of the sport.
um, I do enjoy watching Joanna.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've just gotten to know her better for obvious reasons. But I also enjoy I enjoy watching several. But I'm trying to remember. That's a tough question because there's so many good ones that I
Yeah.
love to watch. Um, you know, I may slay his name, but um, Stylebender.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Adesanya.
yeah, Adesanya. He's got a way of just being that's pretty cool and open, but yet there's parts of him, no doubt, that's over the top, confident.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's an entertainer, so he's a perfect kind of guy for this business, and that's part of what all this is entertainment. Um, so when it comes to like style and uh, outside the box, I think he does really really well at that. Um,
That's in
and
his
then when it
nickname.
comes to like a good solid fighting technique, there's some other fighters too um, that have continued to show who they are. And if we're talking UFC, that's one thing. I don't know if you're just talking about
Just
UFC.
overall, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
So you can pick Michael Chandler. I know he's great.
yeah, Michael Chandler's a pretty outrageous kind of guy when you watch his workouts and everything else. You
Mm-hmm.
just go, oh my gosh. Um, but also, I would say then what's been neat to see is or somebody I was just thinking of. That was methodical. Max.
Holloway.
Yep,
Yep. Yep.
Max. It's just the guy's a trip. And when he loses, he's smooth. He's such a gentleman.
Yeah.
When he wins, he's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So Max would probably be one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
Hard not to like him. He's a great guy for sure, and really excited for his
He is.
fight next week too. So that will be
Yes, I am
fun.
too. I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm going to be in Oregon, so I hope I
Oh,
get to watch
nice.
it because I'm going to be at my dad's, and they don't really do MMA, but
Mm-hmm.
his son-in-law does. So
There you
I'm
go.
hoping, like, okay, Bill, hey,
Yeah, try and
let's watch the fights.
hang
If we have
out.
to buy them or whatever, let's do it.
Uh,